Welcome, Bridget and Dana. Thank you so much for being on this podcast. It is such a pleasure to have you ladies.
Thanks
Hi,
for having
Elizabeth.
us. We're
Thanks
excited to
for,
be here.
yeah.
Great, great. I just want to jump right in. I want to get to know you ladies a little bit better. So what is your background and how did you get into the work that you're currently doing today?
Sure. I think, like a lot of women in our culture around puberty, I started to learn that my body was somehow wrong and that weight gain was wrong. And I started dieting probably like 13 or 14, and that carried on into some really severe disordered eating in my early 20s. And I went from sort of the standard issued overt dieting of Weight Watchers and Nutrisystem and shifted through a health coach training into the sneakier, more covert diet slash wellness industry where, now it was cloaked in this idea of being well and being healthy, but really it just served to make me better at dieting and sort of amplify that fraught relationship with food. So it wasn't until I found intuitive eating and the body positive movement and started to really understand why my relationship with food and my body had devolved as far as it did. And the work of Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch and many others, where I started to actually work on the underlying relationship with food and my body and myself, essentially. And that led me to shift my own health coaching practice to the work we do today, which is helping women break out of the diet binge cycle and helping them make peace with food in their bodies so that they can do more with their lives than count almonds.
Yeah, thank you. Thank
Mhm.
you, Bridget.
Yeah, really similar. Started dieting from a very young age. I grew up in a very quote unquote health conscious household where I think a lot of values were not only around health, but also around weight and equating the two. And I had a moment in a doctor's office at a very young age where I was told I was a little high on the old BMI chart, and that led to a lot of disordered eating for decades to come and struggling with food in my body. I, similar to Dana, we actually met working at a health coach company. So went through the health coach training myself, and which same thing further perpetuated a lot of really harmful patterns and disordered eating. And that continued for a while. A real turning point for me was getting very sick. I had Lyme disease and I had to really learn how to relate to my body in a different way. All of the diets, all of the, quote unquote clean eating, none of that worked. All of it stopped working. And it was a major body image disruption, but also a real turning point in learning how to speak to myself differently and have a much kinder, more compassionate relationship with my body. So yeah, now we work together helping women end their own disordered eating patterns and really shift out of really feeling crazy around food, feeling out of control around food, binging, emotional eating, fixating on really rigid food rules, whatever that looks like for them, and shifting into an intuitive eating approach, and also doing a lot of work with body image, feeling at home in their bodies, feeling comfortable and at ease, as opposed to constantly battling their weight and their bodies. So, yeah, that's where we are today.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I love it. Personally, I have had my own battles with eating disorders. So kind of like you ladies, way back in grammar school, I was a heavy set girl, and I'm really short, so it doesn't look good on a short person. So I was teased, I was bullied, all of that. And I went through and did a complete 180 because I saw my mom was on Jenny Craig. So I decided to kind of start with that. And that got my mind into this fixation of controlling what I ate. And that led me to anorexia. So I was like 85 pounds or something like that. And then finally, doctor told my mom, she is borderline. I wasn't anorexic that part. I guess you have to be a little bit less than that, but I was borderline, and it was a cause for concern. And since then, up and down, never had a good relationship with food. And like you ladies said, when I got into finally getting into healthy eating, and like there was an empowerment of, I'm eating great. I am, taking control of my eating. But I never got, I don't want to say therapy, maybe therapy, or, got out of that thinking of the good and bad, of the not understanding that my body is okay no matter what. So it turned into, and it's most recent, orthorexia. So it was more or less like, okay, I am, and I knew it because I was kind of down, like looking down on other people, my friends, when they had like a Sprite, and I'm like, well, you shouldn't have that. Or if they have something that's out of the ordinary, and even my husband, I kind of like didn't control him, but it was more or less like, I'm not having any of that because that's bad. And just recently, it was just more or less like I was kind of getting into, okay, I need to get out of this, just because my body is changing. I have a lot of stress in my life, so I know that the adrenals are kind of, fluctuating. They're not doing well, and my body's not, responding well. So it's that mindset which you ladies do so well in your practice. So I just wanted to understand, how do you, um, why is it so hard to change our mindset? Why is it so hard to, because it's hard. It was obviously, I'm 43, and it took me 43 years to kind of get to this point. So why is it so hard for women to get out of this, this world, this dieting, this mindset world?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that's tied up in it, right? One is that we are born and raised into a diet culture, and we are born and raised into a patriarchal culture. And those two things combine, and capitalism as well. Like, there's a lot of money behind the diet industry. So if you look at the way, little girls typically, and this is a generalization, right, but are raised to believe that their appearance is the most important thing about them, right? That your beauty and the size of your body, the shape of your body, it all is really important in terms of safety and security and love and acceptance and all of the good things in life. So women are raised to believe that how they look is the most important thing about them. So our entire culture like reinforces this belief, the media that surrounds us, we internalize this belief. So now we have cultures around body bashing, and we connect around dieting. It's a very foreign concept. It's extremely countercultural still to opt out of dieting and to radically accept your body for how it is today, even if you don't believe it meets these unrealistic beauty ideals, right? So that's the first thing, is that we just live in this diet culture, and we equate thinness with health and beauty and moral virtue. Like you're saying, that you're looking down on other people for drinking a Sprite, right? That is the morality that we have assigned to food choices, as if the size of your body is dependent on your food choices, which it's not. And then if, you know, if you're in a larger body, then that means that there's all these negative connotations that we as a culture place on people in larger bodies that are all totally false, right? Like being lazy or not working hard or letting yourself go or not valuing your health and all these things. So our culture is what breeds this, right? And then we also have, just the overt diet industry alone, not even including the Goops of the world and the wellness industry and all of the liquor being sold, not even including that, $72 billion+ industry. That is a ton of marketing and media and messaging bombarding us constantly that weight loss is the solution to all of the discomfort in your life. And so we mentally filter our life through this idea that, well, I feel the very common negative emotions in life, but it's because I'm too big. I need to diet. I need to fix my health through dieting. I need to fix my unhappiness through dieting. My whole life will be better if I'm thinner. And this is just the messaging that is everywhere around us. So those are the pieces of it, I think.
Yeah, no, and I agree. You think, I mean, it's gotten a little bit better, but you think that, people would stop, but there is money behind it. You know, it's always there. It's always there. And it's funny because then it's not just, this diet or this diet. It's like, oh, I'm on keto. So you have to do keto because it's great, or it's the best thing, or I'm on, paleo, or vegan, you have to do vegan or else, whatever. Yeah, it's always out there, and it's always external. It's always external because it's not even just the society. I think it's also external as far as in our world, our bubble. So like family, or like, if you were raised, sometimes I hear, parents were like, well, you need to lose weight. So even our family influences our thoughts about eating, and that's scary. So
Yeah, it's the water we're all swimming in.
yeah, yeah. So how do we break out of it? How does that happen? Like, is it easy? Is it hard? How does that happen?
Well, it's certainly a process. So,
Mhm.
and I think it depends on how long you have been in this struggle with food or your body, right? If for someone who has been struggling for a very long time, it might be a little bit harder to step out of diet culture and reject some of these beliefs and start to heal their relationship with food. But it is very once you do work through that process and once you do heal your relationship with food, it is very easy to be in your body. It is very easy to eat. And we often think that eating is this really difficult thing, this really charged emotionally thing, right? But once you do this process, it becomes easy. It becomes simple to just eat in tune with your body, listen to your body, and be in your body in a way that feels good. So I think the process itself can be a little challenging, but once you do work through it, life is so much easier and eating is really simple. And being in your body in a diet culture is a little bit more challenging, right? And that's why we do a lot of work with body image, because it's really tough to break down some of these cultural narratives, especially if you have family members, like you said, who are making comments, or you're in a social circle where a lot of body talk is going on or a lot of diet talk is going on, right? So, all that said, totally depends. It's going to be based on your individual circumstances. But the way that we start to break out of it is first we believe the first step is healing your relationship with food. So starting to first notice where you are, right? What are the food rules that you have for yourself? What kind of thoughts are coming up as you sit down to eat? And just starting to pay attention, just starting to really notice what eating is like for you. Can you feel your hunger and fullness cues? Are you in tune with your intuitive cues, or are you constantly relying on a diet or some sort of external wisdom to guide your food choices, right? So just starting to notice where you are, building that awareness. And then, from there, it's a lot of work with starting to challenge those food police voices, starting to really combat all the dieting rules that we have for ourselves and start to tune into that wisdom and be guided by how we feel in our body based on what we're eating. And for a lot of people, this is the toughest part, is challenging those food rules that we have and really getting rid of those dieting voices. But it's a practice. So the more you do it, the easier it gets. And the more in tune you start to become with your body's wisdom. So that's the first step. And a lot of women are very underfed, right? A lot of dieters are not eating enough. And unless you're eating enough, you're never going to really be able to eat in tune with your body's cues. It's always going to be challenging to eat, because at that point, biology takes over, right? If you're not eating enough, your body's going to make sure that you're eating enough in some way, if it's working properly. So we start to eat enough, we start to just become well fed on a regular basis, and then we start to tune into those food rules we have and start to listen to our body's guidance instead. And then, of course, there's the body image work as well. And to answer your question about breaking out of these narratives, that's a longer process. And once we fix the food issues and work through that, we have a little bit more mind space to actively break down diet culture in our own lives. And that just, again, starts with the awareness, right? What are the messages that I'm getting on a daily basis? What is the conversation around me like? For me personally, I was working in a place where diet talk was going on all day, right? And living in New York City, you can walk down the street and get a million messages about how you're supposed to look and what you're supposed to eat in order to look that way, right? So starting to notice the messages we're getting and building awareness about what you believe and what is true. And that is really where we start with all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a process. It's definitely, because again, it wasn't overnight that this happened. It was all throughout, you know, your either childhood or, adolescence, all that. So over getting over all of that has to be a longer process than people think. But
Yeah, it's not a 30-day fix.
right, right.
Yeah.
Like, this isn't a diet. This is a lifestyle that we need to kind of understand a little bit more, because it's, again, we as women put so much pressure on ourselves to look our best, to do our best, to be the best, and sometimes that perfectionism can get the best of us. And so undoing all of that will take work, and but definitely needed work.
Yeah. And I think it's important too to realize what your history has been with dieting. If you're someone who's been dieting for a very long time, where has that gotten you, right? Like asking why you believe you need to change your body or why you need to eat a certain way. There's a lot to be unpacked in either of those answers, but starting to kind of understand, well, I believe I need to look a certain way, and what I need to do to get there is to diet or restrict my food in some way or overexercise or whatever the combination is for you. And really asking yourself, has that ever worked for me? And has that ever long term provided me what I want? And what do I believe is on the other side of weight loss that I can't have now? Right? Like asking, why am I trying to control my food? For what purpose? And the real costs of that too. How much mind space is it taking up in your life? Physically, how are you feeling? We see a lot of the binge and restrict cycle. We see a lot of weight cycling. We see a lot of mental distress that comes along with dieting. These are all proven side effects of dieting. So really getting honest about what dieting is costing you, and how much longer do you want to do it, and where has it ever gotten you? Has it ever provided what you really want or what you think the outcome should be?
Yeah, it's kind of like getting to the root cause, right? So if I'm understanding correctly, do you guys really get to, I know you guys aren't therapists or psychologists or anything like that, but do you guys tend to really understand the underlying issues of why they keep dieting, and why they have to, like, say for example, somebody does it because they need to control. Now, there's obviously an underlying issue with that. Is there any talk about, well, let's get to that issue and then we can kind of scrape things, kind of, that is our foundation, and then we can build from there. Is that something that you guys do?
Yeah. And I want to just differentiate. So we work with like the average dieter who
Uh-huh.
is fed up. Like, you're at diet rock bottom. You recognize that your relationship with food is disordered. You're probably being good for a while and then blowing it, binging more and more and more, right? It gets harder and harder to stick to anything, to the point where you're basically just obsessed with eating less and dieting, but you feel totally out of control and you're never actually doing anything to take better care of yourself. So we don't work with clinically diagnosed eating disorders, right? That is a separate issue where you would need a therapist and a dietitian. We work with the average woman who feels out of control around food and crazy around food and is just tired of it taking over all of their mind space every day, right? And so what we find though is that the relationship with food, this feeling out of control around food, the restricting, the binging, the emotional eating, the feeling the guilt and the shame and the disgust constantly, right? You can actually heal that piece of it very quickly. Most of our clients come to us, and usually, I'd say the majority of them never have another binging episode again. their emotional eating tends to dissipate dramatically very quickly, because the feelings of being out of control around food happen because we're restricting. Right. And whether that's physical, because a lot of our clients are like, no, you don't understand. I eat too much. I'm not restricting. Like, I am out
Mhm.
of control. It's like you are psychologically restricting. Mentally, you're on a diet.
Yeah.
Physically, you might not be following that diet, but mentally, every time you take a bite of food, there's all this stuff going on in your brain, right? That's what we need to fix. So we
Mm.
like to think of it as really working with the relationship with food and the diet brain, because being on a diet or living your life with a diet brain are two different things. And the diet brain is what needs to be healed to just make eating easy and normal again, right?
Yeah.
To not be obsessed, to not feel out of control, to be able to go to a barbecue with your family and not be like obsessively chatting in your brain about what to eat and what not to eat, right?
Mm.
Just being able to eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full and be at peace, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the end goal for our clients. And it's the letting go of the diet mentality that eliminates most binging and emotional eating pretty quickly. But for clinically diagnosed eating disorders, but what we see with our coaching clients, because that's what we are, coaches, like you said, we're not therapists.
Mhm.
What happens is that once we start to eat normally and make peace with food, it's usually like after a few weeks, our clients are like, well, food's not really a big, food's sort of like a non-issue, but now this is coming up. And what this usually is body image. Because if we weren't so desperate to change our bodies, we never would have incurred this dysfunction around food in the first place, right? So the food part is almost easier. And then we have to look at, well, why, when did you first learn that your body was wrong? Right. And like, if you do want to take care of yourself, has dieting ever led you to actually taking care of yourself? Like, because you can take really great care of your health without dieting, right? We only believe that you can do that without dieting, right? So it's like what the underlying cause is usually comes up once we're feeling more at peace with food, and then we can work with what's under the hood, because it's never really about the food, you
Right.
know?
Right. Well, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, I get it. It's the relationship more than anything with not only, the food, but yeah, the food is just, the excuse for your body image. It's there, because you're wanting to look a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is,
Exactly.
how many do you guys, what are your clients like as far as the age? Do you guys work with a lot of women over 40, or how, if you can?
25 to 70.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have a great range. You have a great range. Okay.
Yeah, I think our youngest client was 24 so
Okay.
far, and our oldest about 67 or 66. So the commonality is feeling out of control around
Yeah.
food and just being at that diet rock bottom where like you cannot think about downloading the Weight Watchers app one more time. Like you
Mhm.
just know in your gut that if you're ever going to be free and just like live a confident, happy life, like you just have to figure out a different way to relate to food in your body. So that's the core issue with our clients. And that comes in all shapes, sizes, and ages for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the similarity. Now, I'm assuming with the body image, there has to be a difference between a 25-year-old and a 50-year-old.
Mhm.
In terms of, because obviously things shift, things change. 25-year-old could, look a certain way just like that, right? But whereas, you deal with somebody, your client is 50, it's not that easy. So how do you go about doing that? Like what is your approach?
Yeah, well, I would say, there might be differences in terms of age simply based on how long someone has been dieting or struggling with their body, right? So that is certainly a factor. And this is just my opinion. It's not any fact by any mean, but I do think that the younger generation, maybe because they have been in diet culture for less time, I don't know, but it does seem like there's a shift. They have body positivity, right? Like when we were growing up, we didn't have the internet really. We didn't have, or at least access to it like we do with social media, right? So there are certain factors I think that contribute to something like someone who is older and has been in diet culture for a long time, and someone who maybe grew up with something with these formal diets like a Weight Watchers or, an Atkins diet or whatever, Slim Fast. Like now we see it a little less overt, which is still sneaky, still problematic, but it's not quite as overt as now instead of Weight Watchers, we have the rebranded WW, right? Or we have keto or paleo or these lifestyles. So still diet culture, but I think the message is less over in terms of like, here is how you have to look to have a happy, healthy life, right? So someone who's been in that longer certainly might feel the effects of it a little bit more and might have a harder time breaking out of that. However, the work is still the same. It's still challenging these cultural narratives. It's still looking at our personal beliefs and looking at how we were raised and what sort of messages we got, and shifting our beliefs into something that serves us and supports us. And the food process is still the same, right? We are applying we work with the intuitive eating framework. So we're applying the same principles there to heal your relationship with food. And the body image work is really individualized. Of course, there's some cultural narratives that apply to everyone that we want to break down, right? But the beliefs that we all have, while there might be some common themes and some common threads, it's going to be, what I grew up hearing and what I grew up believing, and, what sort of got lodged into my self-conscious might be different than you did. And depending on who raised you and what, where you were in the world at that point. Right. So, that's why I think coaching is very effective, because we can work with you on an individual basis versus sort of reading a book or listening to a podcast or, getting the information on an intellectual level. It's kind of like the difference between listening to a podcast about intuitive eating and actually applying the principles in your everyday life, right? Like I could listen to a podcast about surfing or horseback riding, but until I'm actually in the water on the board or on the horse, it's a different practice, right? So the work there is going to be similar but different, if that makes sense for everyone, no matter where they are in what stage of life they're in.
Yeah. And I think a common misconception, like you were talking about the age difference, right? Like a common misconception with body image is that it has anything to do with your body, right? Body image is a mindset. So it doesn't really matter what your body looks like at the end of the day. Your body image is your beliefs and the stories you're telling yourself about how your body looks. And that's separate, of course, to how culture intersects with people's bodies, right? Because we do have weight stigma and ageism and all of the isms, right? And those things are very real. But when it comes to your own personal body image, it's in your mind. It's not necessarily on the scale or in the mirror.
True. Very true. Yeah. What we believe, we see. And so we have to change that mindset. Wonderful. So you guys have a podcast. I would love to hear more about it.
Sure. Our podcast is Wellness Lately. And it's just a really great way for us to, share our work and, guidance to people who are interested in starting to walk this path away from dieting. And we also interview a lot of really interesting thought leaders in the space around mostly food and body image, but also, complementary topics like we just had Dr. Kristen Neff on for self-compassion, and we've had a few different authors on. And it's just a really great platform to share amazing work in the world, to interview really cool people we might not have access to without the platform, and also to connect with our audience on a deeper level, to share like the tools and tips to help them get started and continue on this journey.
Perfect. Yes, I'm going to download it once I get off of this. And
Awesome.
I would love to. Yeah. So where can people find you outside of the podcast? Where can people find you? And do you have any like offers that's going on, anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. We have a really great masterclass that's totally free. Anyone can take that. It's at wellnesslately.com/masterclass. And that is where we teach the 5 shifts to end binge eating. So if you are struggling with this pattern of restricting your food and, being good for quote unquote good for a week, and then, finding yourself on the weekend going nuts and feeling really crappy in your body. And that cycle is really draining you repeatedly and it's taking up a lot of mind space. This class explains why, like how you got here, right? And what to do about it. So how to shift into a healthier and just more easeful, more peaceful relationship with food. We talk a little bit about body image there, and we talk about how to actually start applying this, because like I said, a lot of this is you have to put it into practice in your daily life, right? So we tell you exactly how to do that. Great place to start if you're kind of interested in this, but not sure where to go from here. And we also have a free Facebook group. That's a great place to connect around these topics. And, you know, there's a bunch of women going through it together, working on similar struggles in their own lives. And we do some free coaching every week in there and share resources. So that's a fun community as well if you're interested in this topic.
What is the Facebook group called?
That is, if you just search Wellness Lately, that should
Okay.
pop up, but I believe that it's Wellness Lately's intuitive eating support or something along those lines.
Okay, so just search. I'll
Food
search,
freedom.
and then what I'll do is I'll link up the actual thing in the show notes. So all they have to do is click on it and they'll go to that page. So
Yeah. And if
awesome.
you go to wellnesslately.com, all of this is there.
Got
So
it.
that's like a place to get everything. There's a little link to our Facebook group, podcast, free class. You can also set up a breakthrough call with one of us to chat if, you know, any of this is resonating and you could use some help. We have free breakthrough sessions with one of our coaches. So you can just hop on the phone and chat with one of us as well. And that's on our website as well.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, Bridget and Dana, I just want to acknowledge you. Before I get to the last question, I want to acknowledge both of you for what you're doing in this world, for helping women get over the stigma of the dieting world, of body image issues, because we definitely need it. And it, you know, no matter what age, no matter, you know, what we're going through, I know that we all, every single woman on this earth is going through some sort of, you know, fight in ourselves, mentally, physically, and how you guys are showing up and helping women get out of that and get free in their own body and in their own mind is just phenomenal. And I'm glad that to have you on here to share all of your knowledge, all of your works with my audience. So thank you again.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for saying
Yeah,
that.
Yeah,
appreciate that. And
no
thanks for the
problem.
opportunity to share.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last and final question that I have is, do you both have a quote or a final word of inspiration?
Quote. It's tough.
That is tough. Well, my favorite quote is a ship in the harbor is safe, but that's not what ships were built for. I have this little tattoo to remind me of that because it is an everyday thought, right? So that's my favorite quote. And I think there's another quote that is on my bulletin board. If you will let me go pull it up, I will read it to you. But I think that this is really sort of has a lot to do with our work as well. And it's by Rumi, and it's out beyond wrongdoing and right doing is a field. I'll meet you there. And it's just one of my favorite reminders of, you know, this idea that there is a right or a wrong, that we can just exist and be at peace and, you know, I don't know, exist, and we are worthy of existing regardless of the right or the wrong, or, you know, what we believe is right or wrong about ourselves as well.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
That is
Bridget.
really beautiful.
Yeah, I'm seriously tearing up over here. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite quotes of all time is "When There Are Nine" by RBG, who's right here.
Okay.
And I think it just kind of speaks to our underlying mission here at Wellness Lately, which is, like we said earlier, it's never really about food. But what it is about is women feeling comfortable showing up as who they are in the world and doing better things with their time than going to Weight Watchers meetings, right? There's so much time, energy, and mind space taken up. And what could happen if all women just felt at peace in their bodies? What could they do with all of that time and energy and mind space back? So that's what I think about when I think about our real mission here. And I just feel like that RBG quote really speaks to that pretty strongly.
Beautiful. And what was it again? I'm sorry. What was
When there are nine.
When there are nine?
Yeah, they asked her, well, how many women will be enough women on the Supreme Court? And she said,
Got
when
it.
there are 9. Yeah.
Okay. Beautiful. That's awesome. Both you ladies. That's really touching. I love it. Well, thank you both for being on here, sharing everything. And I would love to do this again if you guys are up for it down the maybe in a few months. So we'd love to do
we'd
a
love
part
to.
2 so that we can kind of get to know a little bit more about what you're doing. So thank you, ladies, again.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you.
Elizabeth. That
Thanks for
sounds
having
good.
us.
All right. Well, until next time, you are worth it.